Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
When I survived to see 1985, which I wasn't supposed to do, I was invited to be on this sermon trial. And I was the first patient on the drug, and within 6 weeks of treatment, all my KS lesions disappeared and my stage 4 lymphoma went into complete remission. And both have remained in remission ever since. So I'm sure that that helped my survival. Mm-hmm. However, I have to add that of the 90 people on the drug trial, the sermon drug trial, I am one of 2 survivors. It actually killed a number of the people who took it. And everybody else died from the complications of HIV and AIDS within a year or 2. So it very nearly killed me. And,
right.
I went legally blind. I was paralyzed on the left side of my body. I mean, horrible neuromuscular damage. It blew out my adrenal glands and several other things. And I am lucky I survived the trial, but I did, and the cancers have remained in remission all these years.
I mean, the same question continues to apply. You just described this chicane of danger and death and everybody else dying, and there you are standing.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point you have to just look up to the heavens. I mean, you're a man of faith.
Yes.
You have to look up and say, okay, what do you have for me? I mean, at some point that you just have to surrender to that, don't you?
Exactly. Yes. I at some point I just had to accept the fact that I had survived what few other people did, or what hardly anybody else did on Sermon. It's interesting, when I first went into remission in 1984 on the Sermon trial, the nurse who took care of us on the trial, a man named Scott, who had been a medic in the Marines in Vietnam, he's this tough character, really, really compassionate and wonderful. And when I went into complete remission, the first time he saw me after that, he said, it's no mistake that this has happened to a highly visible clergyman. Because I had already done a lot of interviews about being a person with AIDS, about being a gay man with AIDS. And so he thought that it had something to do with God needing a vehicle of hope. And I made that my mission. After I recovered from the sermon trials, I got well, and I was well for 20 years. And I made it my mission to travel as far afield as I could as the field director of AIDS ministry for my denomination, the Metropolitan Community Churches, and give hope where there was all this hopelessness, and try to inspire people to live as best they could with HIV and AIDS, and do the work of healing. And whether that meant that you healed into life, as I did, or heal into death, it was important to do the work of healing.
How long does it take for you to accept that? How long does it take for you to accept that God had made this choice, with someone like you to push forward, to do this work?
I'm not sure I've still accepted it. Okay. I put one foot in front of the other and do the next thing that is required of me. And I felt like I had received this enormous gift of grace in my survival. I just, the luckiest person in the world. And I believe that I can't keep it unless I give it away. So I kept making it a point to give it away through my writing, through my sermons, through my speeches that I gave, through my daily interactions with people with AIDS, with other people with AIDS,
Yeah.
and as a hospice chaplain at the AIDS hospice here in Los Angeles.
I don't think this thing recorded this part, so I want to ask this first question again. You were diagnosed in 82.
Correct.
This is well before any kind of protocols or anything was in place.
Right. There were no treatments, period.
What was that moment like for you when they tell you this? Did you even know what it was that you had, or did they have to explain it to you?
Oh, I knew about AIDS and what was then called GRID, because I'd read the news articles in the New York Times and in The Advocate, the gay magazine, when it was first reported in the medical journals that there was this new thing happening among gay men, and it was thought at the time to be only among gay men. And that's why it was called gay-related immunodeficiency, or GRID.
Right.
So there were no treatments. And even when I was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma and Kaposi sarcoma a couple years later, after having already lived through hepatitis, CMV, pneumonia, mononucleosis, herpes, shingles, a variety of fungal infections that included a fungal infection that the dermatologist had not seen since he was a medic in New Zealand in the South Pacific in World War II.
Yeah.
And walking in sheep dung was supposedly what gave that to you. New Zealand sheep dung, but I'd never been to New Zealand. Anyway, that kind of bizarre thing was what people with AIDS were experiencing, and I experienced. And even when I was diagnosed with the cancers in '84, my doctor told me, not everyone is going to die from AIDS, even though that's what it seemed like was happening. And she said, if 1 in a million people survive AIDS, why not believe that you're going to be that 1 in a million and act accordingly? And that's why I set out to do everything I could to create the conditions for medicine to work, for medications to work when they became available.
But a 1 in a million bet is a pretty long call, especially with as sick as you were and all of the things you were battling. It's not easy to continue to believe that. And again, we got to come back to the faith side of this. At some point, you have to give this up to God and say, all right, this is your path. I don't get this path. I don't see how this is supposed to work. But
no, I did. I mean, I had moments of sheer despair and doubt, and wondering why God was doing this to me, or wondering if there really was a God at all. If this kind of thing was happening, how could there be a God? I think that asking the tough questions was an important part of surviving. There's a wonderful book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a German Jewish psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz. And he wrote in this book, Man's Search for Meaning, that the people who survived the Holocaust, aside from the arbitrary slaughter, the people who survived were people who asked the tough questions and were of service to other people, and there were a few other things as well, but the takeaway for me was keep asking, what does this all mean? Keep asking, where is God in all of this? And to help others too. I mean, when I was first a client at AIDS Project Los Angeles in 1984, they put me to work right away as a phone buddy to people with AIDS. And that meant I sat for 2 hours every week and talked to a list of people with AIDS who were clients of APLA. And at that time, in 1984, there were so few of us that I could literally call all the people with AIDS in Los Angeles County whose names began with M through Z in 2 hours.
Wow.
And talk to each of them and find out how they were doing and if they had any needs. And so that got me outside of myself. And for 2 hours during the week, I wasn't thinking about myself. I was thinking about other people.
We were talking off mic before the show about Save the Brave, my charity, the stickers all over my truck and everything. But this is the same thing, right? Like, you ask these questions. Here I am. I've survived. The work that I did by the day, by the minute, becomes less and less relevant as the Taliban takes over the country.
Yes.
And it's easy to get lost in your head, like nothing I did matters, whatever. And then also, if you're not of service to someone, a lot of my friends will say this to me, like, you're so genuine, you're so authentic. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be authentic. I are authentic. Like, I just do what I do. And look, when you've almost died, and I think you're going to get where I'm going with this. When you've almost died, I've been hit by a tank. I've been hit by mortar. All these things that have happened in my life. There's not a whole lot of time for things that aren't important. If I make a typo, guess what? We're all going to survive. Can you think of something that's more ridiculous than worrying about a typo? Yes, I don't want typos, but if it's there, it's like, whatever. It's a typo,
It prioritizes things, certainly. And it makes you realize what's really important in life. Having lived so close to death myself for so many years, both my own and others, other people's deaths, and had my own near-death experiences, what I've learned is that what's really important is love. Looking in each other's eyes and really seeing each other. And seeing each other with compassion, understanding that the person you are looking at is a human being who's had doubts and worries and fears and trauma, perhaps, and having compassion for that person is what's really important. Loving that person who's right in front of you, and the rest is all gravy, and living so close to death too, I realized you can't take the toys with you. The toys aren't really very important at all, and so I have worked at fostering friendships and loving relationships. I like what Armistead Maupin wrote. I don't know that he was the first to write this, but he wrote about how we have biological family and we have logical family. And our biological family, of course, is the family that we're born into. And I love my family. We have great talks, a number of us among ourselves. But then I also have my logical family, which became really important to me because I didn't have any biological family living here in Southern California when I got sick. And so the logical family were my gay brothers and lesbian sisters and transgender sisters and brothers and all of the people who surrounded me, be they straight or gay, at AIDS Project Los Angeles and at the Metropolitan Community Churches where I serve. And also, I've sung with the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles for years, GMCLA, and I love singing and I love being with these men, these gay men who love to make music together. And what a gift and what a life-giving gift that is. And it's all about being with each other. Again, going back to love and compassion.
I worked a lot on the ground, so I had to go talk to Afghans, Iraqis, that kind of thing. And you have to come from that point of view. I don't have to accept what they do,
Right.
because that would be different than my mores and my culture. But I have to understand that they got to this path, whatever it is, whatever odious, because look, as a spy, I've got to go find evil people, right? But I also have to go talk to other people that have been through suffering and strife. My book of woe is massive, like yours. I've been so close to death.
Yes.
But I learned it's not my job to place an agenda on someone or to assign a political outcome or whatever. And I frankly, I don't care what your sexual orientation is.
Yeah.
I mean, until it's relevant to the conversation, I'm never even going to ask about it, because I'm not going to come out and say, I'm a heterosexual guy. But hopefully we can get to this point more where we just focus on who this person is and allow them to be who they are. Yes. And then look, if I need to correct your behavior through some twist of fate, which shouldn't be a thing, but whatever, I would have to know you before I ever dared to try to improve who you were or change who you were, especially if you didn't ask me to do that. We struggle with this, though, where we tend to put Look, it's easy to look at me and go, you're a white guy, you're a white supremacist, you're a Republican, hey, easy. Ask me some questions, get to know me first, right?
Exactly.
It might turn out that I do most of the things I do out of love, out of seeking understanding. I will get in my car and I will go to a hard place to hear what they have to say because I don't know until I've experienced what you're experiencing. And even then, I can only do snapshots. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It completely makes sense to me. I think that it's so important to reach out to people and to be friends with people and include them in your logical family who are different than you are. Diversity is a blessing. It's not a curse. And it's so wonderful to get to know people who are atheists and agnostics and talk with them about the tough questions. I have a number of friends who are non-believers. And to me, some of those friendships are the most valuable in that I learn about my own self by talking with them and by learning about how they perceive the world and what works for them or doesn't work for them. And trying to understand where they're coming from helps me grow as a human being. And I think that, especially spiritually, it helps me grow. And I think that that's one of the really important tasks we have in life, is to grow spiritually. And I do that from embracing all kinds of different people I may not agree with at all, but trying to understand and have compassion and live in their shoes, walk in their shoes for a while, you know, to see why they believe what they believe or don't believe.
I was having a conversation with a friend on the way over. One thing is I've learned is to kind of let the road, I call it the road, by getting out of my house and experience things. If a thought comes to me, hey, call so-and-so, I try to accept that and I call that person. I know that there's a lot of bias in that, but I try to let the road kind of guide where I'm going and what I'm doing. That's one thing. And then the other thing, and I'm sure that resonates with me, and you're talking to people, calling everybody from M to Z who had AIDS in the 80s. You build this network of people that need a touch, or that you need to touch for your own well-being. This community-making mechanism matters because as important as diversity is, we need some unity.
Absolutely.
And they're polar opposites, right? They're antonyms, but if you can keep in mind that diversity is hard because you don't hardly ever get what you want. 10 people go out to dinner every night. You're going to have to, at some point, agree on some palate choices, you know?
Right.
So we lose sight of that. And that, I think it comes through wisdom and through evolution of our own selves and maturation. But how do you do that? How do you evolve? How do you learn to become more tolerant? Because look, bigotry and tolerance are a norm. I think human norm, right? But how do you get past that where you allow the diversity to have a chance of creating some unity?
Well, it's a journey. And like you spoke about being on the road.
Yeah.
I am on the path of learning just what you're talking about, how to embrace and be kind to and understanding of and accepting of people who are very different than I am. We're sitting here in the sanctuary at my church doing this interview, and I'm sitting right next to the communion table. And communion is common union. It's coming together in community. Unity is part of community. And that is so important for us who believe in the communion sacrament. I think that breaking bread, sharing a meal with other human beings is the same thing. It's finding the common unity of eating together, enjoying good food together, breaking bread together. That in and of itself is sacred, I believe, even if you don't believe. To me, it's sacred space.
It's primal.
Yes.
And that sharing of food, allowing someone to be a great host, reminding them that they're a great host. We have this other problem where we look at something as a you problem or a me problem, community or self, right? And so if I if I'm in a bad spot, it's easy to blame everybody else. But in fact, if I focused on my faith, my resilience, slowly improving my progress and investing in myself. Yes, there may be a lot of external factors. Turns out the world is never going to be easy on anybody.
Right.
And as you know, it will kick you in the gut when you're down. And as soon as you get your breath, it kicks you in the gut again. So yes, there's always going to be external factors. But if we can steel ourselves, we have a chance to hopefully be more resilient to whatever comes at us, and also be a little more tolerant that other people are probably like, I don't want your problems. I'm positive you don't want mine. so let's work on our own stuff. And then I guess with that comes these tactical things, right? If you want to learn to do something or to become something, what is the next step? Literally the next micro granular step.
Right.
Can you pray every day? And if you're not a religious person, can you meditate every day? Can you go for a walk every day?
Yes.
No, I can't. Well, then that's your work right there.
Yes.
Can you go out and reset yourself? And these things seem easy, but practice is hard because you have to practice your practice.
That's right. That's right. You do. And I try to practice my practice every day and in every way. And just be present. There's a wonderful Native American saying that the quality of life is not measured by the length of life, but by the fullness with which we enter into each present moment. And that saying was just so important to me when I was certain that I was facing death, and early death from a horrible disease. All any of us have is right here, right now. And in this moment, I choose to feel engaged with you in conversation. I choose to want to learn from you and your experience. I have worked as a psychotherapist in a locked psych ward, and I remember one of the patients that I worked with was a veteran of the first Iraq War, and his job was to pick up body parts off the battlefield.
Yeah.
And it wrecked him. It absolutely wrecked him. But in finally talking about that years later, he began to experience the first steps of healing, which he had not experienced prior. I'm not saying I had anything to do with it, but other than being engaged in conversation with him and wanting to hear his story. And when he finally was able to tell his story, that's when the healing began for him. I have no idea whatever happened to him, but I know that in those moments, there was a coming together of the two of us that just expanded my world, certainly. I mean, it served me as much as it served him, if not more.
There's a lot of lessons in that. And I want to say shout out to my buddy Dickie, who's watching and listening to us. But when you get into that moment and your job is to pick up body parts in the battlefield, you go do it because physically it's fine and you probably can withstand a certain amount of it, right? But you don't know going in that you're 1 in a million, that you're going to survive AIDS and cancer and everything else, right? You don't know going in that you're going to withstand whatever COVID has to throw at you. You may have a comorbidity, not even aware of, right? Until you get in that moment. It's like when people think, I would be a great warrior in combat. Well, until you're standing there and the bullets fly. And each time you get better at it, right? And so life is the same way, where like you can want to be something, but until you experience it, until you pay the cost, it may be the thing that transforms you into a better person or a broken person.
Yeah, absolutely. If you had told me even a year before I began to get sick, what was going to happen to me over the next years, and what I was going to experience, I would have told you, I don't want any part of it. No, I don't think I can do that at all. And yet, as I put one foot in front of the other, I learned that I could face fear, that I could face severe illness, that I could face death and come away a better person for it, a person with more faith, with more spiritual understanding of life. And another thing that I love, saying that I love, came from a preacher called William Sloane Coffin, who was a tremendous Protestant preacher of the late 20th century. And I heard him speak once, and he said, fear is a natural part of life, but we have a choice about what to do with it. We can be scared to death, or we can be scared to life. We can let the fear isolate us and paralyze us, or we can let the fear expand our universe, and we can let the fear motivate us to do whatever we need to do to experience healing and strength and life and love. So I've often remembered that as I have faced all the different things I've faced through AIDS and COVID. And, I'm very lucky. I don't have COVID. I haven't had COVID. I've been very, very careful about, protecting myself, and I've had my logical family as well as my biological family help me in innumerable ways to stay safe and healthy. I had a friend, a really good friend of 20 years or so, who had a lot of the same underlying conditions I had, who got COVID and died quickly. And that scared me. Oh, believe me, it scared me. Again, I had to remember what Coffin said in his sermon, that we can be scared to death, or we can be scared to life. We can be scared of death, but that means we're scared of life. I think the two are very much connected. So I choose to be scared to death, even with COVID, the risks of the Delta variant now and all the different variants that may happen. I choose to be fully alive in this moment because I don't know what's going to happen in the next moment, and neither do you.
We were talking in our family the other night about how we had made some life choices to partake in life in 2019. And those things wouldn't have been possible 8 months later, rafting down the Grand Canyon, a life-defining dream trip,
Of course, yeah.
That happens. On that trip, for the first time in maybe 50 years of this company doing rafting tours, a man passes away on the trip. Incredible. Not anybody's fault, just life doing what life does.
Sure.
But, again, this person chose to make this. And if you're going to pick a way to go, I was on a rafting trip, and, that was my last thing. And I went out among friends, new friends, and experiences. You have to go out and vote to do life. We had a big, huge party for our 50th birthday at our house. People still talk about this fantastic party. And so you can't just blow all your money. You can't just, not have any eye on the future, but you have to hold yourself accountable to live today, right now.
Yes.
Even if that just means being present and I drove 35 miles to come sit here and have this wonderful experience with you, and it's because I know that there's an investment in love and community when we do these things.
Yes, absolutely. I had, speaking of planning for the future, when I was first diagnosed, when I received my terminal prognosis, APLA sent me to a lawyer, an attorney, to write my will and all of that, to do my final paperwork. And I resisted it for the longest time, but then when I finally did it, this attorney was just wonderful, and he was so kind and compassionate. And he said to me, it's really important that you make plans. You can make plans, but you can't plan the results. And so we made the plan of doing all this paperwork that needed to get done, the legal documents for, a final journey. But I couldn't have anticipated that I would survive that journey by years, by decades, but I did.
And that's a shocker, right? We talked about Rob Bell before we started. You listened to my interview, one of the interviews I did with him, and I love Rob Bell. And one of the things he and you two taught me is that love is bigger than anything else.
Right.
You can always count on love to just have an endless well of energy for you. And it's easier said than done, but how do you lean on love? And have you ever had love fail you?
Oh, what interesting questions. How do I lean on love? I try to remember it as many moments as I can. So I try to lean into love when I'm engaging with people. And sometimes, love has failed me. And I'm I have never had a long-term loving relationship, a one-on-one, intimate, long-term relationship. And that has been a matter of some grief to me that I've never experienced that. And believe me, I've spent hours on the couch about that as well. But I've loved different men in my life who I hoped would love me. And when it didn't happen, I still tried to love them. I still tried to, as much as possible, recommit to love and to the possibility of love in all of its manifestations. And one of the things I learned from living so close to death for so many years as I have is that I may not have a husband, I may not have a spouse, but in my biological and logical family, I have a rainbow of lovers and spouses and husbands and wives, people who in mosaic make up that husband that I wish I had had. So that's one of the ways that I try to lean back into love and to do that. And yes, love has failed me from time to time. I don't know if that vet who picked up body parts as his job, I don't know if he ever really got well. As a psychotherapist, you do what you can with a patient, and especially when you're working on a locked ward, and you let them go. You have to let them go and hope for the best for them. But I don't know that my efforts at loving him helped him really heal.
I had a guy on the show from Southern California, and it's 3 men in a marital relationship, and they all raise the kids together, right? And they have 2 kids, and they have the biological mothers are part of the family. And so these things, they try, we talk about modern family. Here we go. There's a modern family right here. And they were able to convince the court down in San Diego that, hey, this is a good thing. I know we're atypical and you're not allowed to make law here in this court, but this is what we'd like to do. And the judge, to her credit, said, yeah, you know what? We can do that. And what I learned is even if that concept makes me uncomfortable, because, and it's okay to be uncomfortable with this, because 3 dudes raising kids, I don't understand how you guys can, there's a lot of questions, right?
Yeah.
Polyamorous is not a normal kind of thing. However, what is normal is that they were surrounded by love.
Yes.
And if you've got a bunch of adults who love each other and love raising this kid and the other kid, they're all being raised with love, then, I mean, what else do you need? I mean, the guy's a doctor. They're not worried about finances. They're going to be fine, but they have love there between all these collection of adults. It's not normal, but the love part does seem to be pretty damn normal.
And it works.
Yeah.
It works. I bet those kids are very healthy kids, I struggled for so many years with my homosexuality. I grew up feeling so ashamed of myself because of who I was, who I am, a homosexual. And I knew at an early age that there was something really different about me. And the other kids would call me fairy and sissy and bully me about it and all that. And I knew that somehow they were right. But when I finally came out, I began to learn from the pastor of the Good Shepherd Parish MCC, the Metropolitan Community Church that I went to in Chicago in the 70s. Reverend Ken Martin would talk about how God is love, and where love is, there too is God. So for God to condemn my love for another man would be for God to condemn God if God is love. And theologically, that just can't happen.
Right.
So God, I think the universe, not just God, but the universe, loves our love. It's one of the things I said to Tammy Faye Baker, was that Jesus loves me just the way I am. Jesus loves the way I love. And it took her aback, and she got very emotional at that point. And that is one of the things that is often most quoted from that now infamous interview.
Yeah.
And the fact that I said that in 1985 was really radical at the time.
Yes.
It's still radical in its way, but God loves the way I love because God is love.
Yeah.
And for non-believers, love is love. What's wrong with love? Tell me what's wrong with love. I can't figure it out myself. I think love is grand. Love is wonderful. Love is special and powerful. And you don't have to believe in God to believe in love.
Yeah. People often forget where we were. I mean, to say the word faggot or sissy or fairy and all these, and I'm not saying these to be provocative, but this was thrown at you all the time. So society didn't accept who you were, and we're so far past that now. Like it's almost, in terms of, and I'm not speaking for the community, but in terms of being a gay man, it's almost irrelevant completely, almost at this point, which is so different than it was before. And we're bringing in other groups and other forms of sexual orientation and identity, and we're learning to process these things. And yes, it's painful. And guess what? The 80s were painful.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I still have deep down inside of me, and I'll just be honest about this. Okay, I have no problem with Freddie Mercury or what he did or how he lived his life. But there's part of me that has that 80s version, that mockery that we had of Freddie Mercury, you know, in me. And it's in there, and I'm mature enough to go, look, that's stupid. And I've evolved to that point. But that evolution takes time, and not everybody gets there at the same speed. I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about the struggle of being a young person who's gay, queer, whatever, all the different titles, right? A lot of the problem is, again, with ourselves. Yes, the community has to accept who you are, but you have to be comfortable with who you are to be able to come out. There's a lot of mistrust of parents who are just focused on, like, I knew before you did, or, I love you no matter what, but the person struggles to accept that love is there. And there is a leap.
There's a big leap for a lot of people.
Right.
And there was a big leap there for me.
Yeah.
And it took me years to come out. I mean, I came, now I look back and I go, oh my God, I was young when I came out. I was 23. 24. And I mean, the coming out process takes time. It's still happening. We're still coming out even today. Those of us who are out, we're still out, coming out. Anyway.
Yeah.
It was a huge leap to get from, oh my God, I'm so ashamed of myself for being a homosexual, to I'm out and proud. I love being gay.
Yeah.
And I love the LGBT community. And I love singing with the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get to that. But I'm there, and oh boy, do I celebrate that. And I try to convey that to young people today. One of the things that we do in the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles is that we have this Alive music project, or AMP, where we go into middle schools and high schools and do mini concerts with like five or six numbers we sing. And in between the songs we sing, some of us tell our stories of what it was like for us to be a teenager and grappling with our sexuality in the 60s or the 50s or the 70s or the 80s, and the fact that we grew up to be human beings who have hopefully embraced our sexuality, our homosexuality, and have embodied that to a point where we can be out and proud about it. It's just amazing to see the kids who are sitting there, and they're obviously, I mean, to my eyes, they're obviously gay and lesbian or transgender.
Right.
And there, sometimes you see this transformation happen in them. Just hearing from adults who are happy about being gay, because it's still not easy for
Right.
kids. You know,
Middle school's not easy for any kid.
no, of course not. But we still, I mean, we now have lots of images of gay and lesbian and transgender people in the news, on TV, in TV series, so that we have images. Back when I was growing up, I thought I was the only one in the world because I didn't see any other homosexuals in the media, in what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And that's such a lonely spot that was. But thank God that in 1979, I led a contingent from the church that I was then the pastor of, the Metropolitan Community Church of Hartford. I led a contingent to the 10th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, the parade, the LGBT Pride parade that took place, and we marched up Fifth Avenue. There were estimates of hundreds of thousands of people there, easily 300,000, maybe even more, maybe 500,000. Anyway, when we were marching up Fifth Avenue, we got to there's a hill that you get to the top of, and you can look back and see Washington Square in the distance. And somebody told me to turn around and look, and I did. And there were hundreds of thousands of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and our allies in the street in Fifth Avenue, all the way back to Washington Square, Washington Square.
Hashtag not alone.
Not alone. Hello.
Club. Yeah.
And oh my God, was that healing for me to see. Yeah.
When you tell these kind of stories, I think about the veteran PTSD experience, you know, and a lot of us get suicidal. I've been open about my suicidal. I told you about, I have suicidal ideation. It happens every day. I manage it through all of my therapy and everything else. But I do that because I want the next person in line to hopefully not have to go to the point of putting their gun in their mouth. Because I've also talked to those folks that are like, I started doing drugs. I ruined my life trying to deal with this thing. I had a gun in my mouth and I was ready to go. And this thing saved me, you know, and I've had that conversation dozens of times. So I'd rather we have the conversation before they get to that point.
Exactly.
I don't want to catch people at the end of the rope. I want to catch them we're all on a rope, but let's get them before the end so that they, and I bring up this simile because there is a lot of suicide in the gay and lesbian community at all. I'm using brevity here, but it's there because we don't understand how to help that person
Exactly.
as they're sliding down the road.
Exactly. I mean, the number of kids who kill themselves because they're LGBT, you know, we may never know because oftentimes kids suicide without saying, I'm doing this because I'm homosexual and I know that I will never be loved. I know that I cannot live out and proud like these people.
Which breaks my heart because it's so, I'm a little bit emotional right now. My tears are in my eyes because it's so not true. Like we do love you. We are going to love you. You know, we're going to accept you.
Of course. And that's the message that we got to keep giving because there are always new kids growing up who need to hear that message.
Right.
And even in this day and age, you know, and it's you know, it's tough for kids who are, you know, Latinx or African American, or you know, people who are in families that are extremely religious, and the culture that they live in, that they grow up in, is still very homophobic. And how do they come to terms with being gay and lesbian and transgender with in that kind of environment, even now, even today? So that's why we keep doing these Alive Music Project concerts.
I love it. One of the things we talked about earlier, and I don't think we talked about it, but how far we have come. We used to have Pollock jokes all the time. You tell a Pollock joke whenever you wanted. You could tell a dirty wetback Mexican joke. Nobody cared. You could do that with gay jokes. We've come a long way with this stuff. not that we want people controlling our speech, but we have to be mindful that the thing that we're making fun of might be right in front of us, and we don't mean to harm them. And we wouldn't tell the joke if we were aware that a gay person was there. But we've also learned to go, well, those jokes are stupid anyhow. Like, why are we telling Pollock jokes? I mean, what a horrible thing to do to people. And we just picked people. No one really thought Polish people were stupid. I mean, maybe decades ago when they first immigrated here that happens, but we have come a long way, haven't we?
We have indeed come a long way. And when I think about how different things are now and how much easier it is for people to be out in their families and out in the political sphere, like Pete Buttigieg and his husband. And I mean, it's just remarkable how different things are now. And thank God. I mean, we fought the fight for many, many years that Harvey Milk, I came out in the mid-'70s, so Harvey Milk was one of the voices of the new gay liberation that we all loved and talked about. And I learned so much from him. And his basic message was, come out.
Yeah.
Come out to everyone you know, because when a person knows that they know a homosexual, then it changes them. It changes them to know, oh, that person is gay or lesbian or transgender. Yes. And I can no longer just assume all the things that I assumed about people. So coming out is still really important because it gives a human face to something that may be really scary for people.
We've, as a nation, become so stable and so successful in the grand scheme of things that we've gotten away from the church as a population. A lot of us identify as religious or Christian or something, but a lot less practices. It's hard to keep a church open. I mean, the Crystal Cathedral down the road by my house, that was an epic, massive church.
I know. And
now it belongs to another church, so no one would have guessed, in the 80s, no one would have guessed that would happen, right? And they build this magnificent thing. We're losing touch with the responsibility that we have for our spirituality. However you want to define it, it requires maintenance, mental maintenance, physical maintenance, spiritual maintenance. Yeah. What are your thoughts on spiritual maintenance?
Oh, spiritual maintenance is a very important part of my life and for many people I know. And for me, it involves praying for help in the morning and praying my thanks and gratitude at night for the day that has happened and all the blessings that have happened to me during that day. It involves meditation on a regular basis, meaning at least once a day. But for me, I do meditation 2 or 3 times a day. And oh my God, it helps. It really helps. I've always had a problem with anxiety and learning to breathe through meditation and feel peace in the midst of whatever chaos may be going on. What a great gift that is to my spirituality. Being in community with others, being in communion with others through church or through the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles or through my family, logical or biological. That is helpful to my spirituality. Breaking bread with those I love, engaging in conversation, talking about these tough questions. That's all part of my spiritual renewal every day.
I love it. I love
remembering to love.
Yeah. Default to love. I love that as a personal mantra.
Yeah.
And also collecting joy. Sort of thing I believe in. Like, when was the last time you were just overjoyed?
Oh, I know. Yeah. I know. Joy is so important to life. And I read a wonderful book a few years ago called The Book of Joy. It's a conversation between Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. And it was, the both of them have suffered. Each of them have suffered enormously in their lives, and yet they still feel a lot of joy about being alive. And I feel a lot of joy about being alive. I mean, even in the face of all I have faced and all I have survived, joy has always been important to me. That's part of why I sing, because I love that feeling of joyfully expressing my joy through singing, and yeah, joy is not, I have learned, joy is not the absence of suffering or chaos or whatever, but the presence of faith or love or hope or all of the above.